yesterday, Donald Trump was taken off of Twitter. That's what happened. He's taken off Twitter. I think it was a permaban, if I'm not mistaken. And that was one thing. But when you understand how that happened and what made it happen, why that was even a thing, why that was even being discussed, and why these companies took action, you can see that the left had been projecting the entire time when it came to using the term fascism. I said, I've debated leftists, Bernie Sanders supporters on his page. They have absolutely no idea. And to be fair, most people have no idea what the fuck fascism is. They have no idea. They're completely confused. They think that it's bad people to the right of Bernie Sanders. That's fascism to them. This is why they never bother to define it. They can't define it. They don't understand what it is. They don't know the historical precedent. Good luck getting these guys to even know who the hell Mussolini or Giovanni Gentile was. You think they've read the doctrine of fascism? No. They have no idea what it is. So from the start, everything that they had basically been claiming that everybody, or not everybody, certainly Donald Trump was and his fanatics, well, they seem to be guilty of themselves. Let me preface it by saying this. Oh, yes, I'm a libertarian, and yes, I believe in markets, and I believe any private company should be able to do whatever the hell it is they want. See, I'm not making an argument that Twitter shouldn't have the ability to be able to ban the president or anybody for that matter. That's not what I'm saying by any means. Listen, please. But I wanted to bring that up because a lot of crackheads will say they appeal to the market when it's convenient for them. So they'll say, well, Twitter's a private company, so you can't be in opposition to it. Meanwhile, these fools love their beloved Civil Rights Act. They love all the discriminatory acts and will like more state and local Civil Rights Act, which basically make it illegal to stop sale for anybody for any reason that has to do with some of these certain things. That is not okay to them. Now, all of a sudden, these guys are just free marketers and Twitter's a private company and they can do whatever it is they want. That to me is hilarious. But libertarianism, or people that believe in the concept of markets, just because you have the ability, the right to do whatever it is that you want with your private property, does not mean that one has to accept it. This is why these guys are idiots. It's like I had a guy on my page the other day like, wow, why would you say something that this is a problem or something? Don't you believe in the market? Dipshit. What do you think a form of market regulation is? That doesn't mean I have to accept it. That doesn't mean I have to like it. Them having the right to do it does not mean that I have to like them doing whatever it is that they're doing. These guys are idiots. They don't know what they're talking about. They just form arguments and that are phantom, right? So what they do is they say that you is a classic straw man, right? Well, they say that you said something that you never said or that you never claimed, and then they form an argument on it or against that. But going back to what's going down with Twitter, before I go really into this subject matter, I need, and this is some optimism for a lot of you guys, because I know a lot of folks, unfortunately, this is, conservatives, a lot of conservative leaders, Republicans, let's just say that, have gotten this issue wrong. They're all a hyper-emphasis of Section 230 and all that. It doesn't mean anything, right? But when it comes to Twitter specifically, I'll get to the other companies, but when it comes to Twitter specifically, I don't think people understand that Twitter is one alternative away from being rendered obsolete. Now, with Googles of the world and YouTube and Facebook, those are a little different, and we'll get to that in a minute. But Twitter in itself, it has the least amount of monetization options. It is one alternative away from being obsolete. That is the one platform of the big tech companies that for sure is one thing away from like legitimate competitor away from being completely obsolete. So I'm a little more optimistic than a lot of you guys are when it comes to Twitter. This is why conservatives or Republicans or whatever you want to call them should be turning their attention when it comes to these companies. Like if they're using cloud space or if they're having some sort of government contracts through ad space, like sort of like the Department of Defense does with some of these companies, as well as even like with sports leagues and stuff like that. If they had any sense, they would be, because those prop those companies up. So any way that I'm not talking about tax breaks or anything like that. What I'm specifically referring to is ways in which the taxpayer dollar in some way, shape, or form ends up, be it in not necessarily, not all the time, and most times it's not. It's not in the form of an actual grant or a subsidy. Quite often it's like a paid service. But either way, the money that they're spending is completely illegitimate. Why don't they focus on trying to remove that in the event that it exists? But let's get back to the main point. I know I'm 6 minutes into this segment, and I want to get into the main point when it comes to the fascistic thing, right? I think context is very important as to what's happening with right now. And what you're seeing is a purge. Let's call it what it is. A purge on forms of social media where they utilize that one instance, and they were as inconsistent and I don't know what on it. We'll talk about that too. Where they use that one instance in which people kicked their feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk, and they said that was a inciting of violence, right? And therefore, he must go. People that enabled him must go. And the platform the leading competitor, if you will, which it's an echo chamber, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't need to exist, right? I think right now for with the Parler joint, it serves its purpose. It's a way that people can at least communicate with each other that are not leftists and have been taken off the platform. So for that, I'm not saying it's a clean platform or anything or without fault. What I'm saying is that is a necessary thing right now. I can at least, I feel like we can all at least agree to that. So then what happened was you had Google and the Apples of the world basically at the same damn time say that, okay, y'all need to basically do what it is that we do when it comes to this moderation, or we're going to take you off. A complete excuse. It doesn't, that's lousy. It's just something that is coordinated. Now, y'all thought that it was just going to start with Alex Jones and it was going to end with Alex Jones. You're seeing that you're completely incorrect. So it was a coordinated effort, but that coordinated effort was started by the Michelle Obamas of the world and all of these Democratic leaders who were calling on these institutions to do exactly that. So when we talk about fascism, what the hell is fascism? Why is it that a lot of people, which would be the closest thing to conflate it with, is socialistic like corporatism, right? And that is everything in the state, nothing out of it. So it'd be one thing if Twitter was like, yeah, we don't want you to exist on this platform. And again, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have the right to be able to take whoever it is off their platform. I'm not saying that the government should be regulating Twitter. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this was not a merely private effort. It was an effort that was, again, facilitated by way of people that have been connected to the state. And they demanded that was what they do, and they answered the call. To sit there and ignore that is being disingenuous. This isn't my opinion. I don't care if you're a leftist. I don't care if you're a right-winger. This is not my opinion. That is factually what happened. Okay? It was a coordinated effort led by members of the state, and they answered the call to them. And this is why it was always hilarious to me when you consider the history of fascism, the political growth by way of the Godfathers and Gentile, specifically Mussolini. Godfather, I guess you can say, is Giovanni Gentile, but Mussolini, who was a Marxist, one of the greatest forms of propaganda was people and the academics, particularly in the West, that placed communism and fascism on the opposite end of the spectrum. If that's your political spectrum is useless. It is ahistorical and it is useless. Again, not my opinion. Mussolini was literally a Marxist, an admitted Marxist. And when you consider, if you even read, let's say, the doctrine of fascism, right? If you read the doctrine of fascism, and when they talk about rejection of Marxism, they don't reject Marxism because of what it is. Let's say they advocate, let's say, as Marxism. They only rejected Marxism because of it was more of like a utopian way of looking at, let's say, economics. So to them, wrong or right, they looked at it as if they were being more realistic. So that's why they more so rejected Marxism. It was not that, well, collectivism is bad per se. That was not. In fact, if you read the actual, the actual doctrine, right? The doctrine of fascism, which was, I believe, they say Mussolini wrote it, but I believe that, there's evidence that Giovanni Gentile actually was the writer per se. And this is why it says, I'm gonna read you an excerpt from it. It says right here that, let me get my spot real quick. If that previous century was the century of the individual, liberalism implies individualism, we are free to believe that this is the collective century and therefore the century of the state. Now, again, that's the fascists themselves saying that. And this is why it goes in combination with even some of what Hitler was talking about. I did a video, to me, one of my greater works, and it's called "Yes, the Nazis Were Socialists." And in that, what I do is I break down the history of socialism, and I talk about Mussolini, I talk about Giovanni Gentile, I talk about Hitler, and I talk about the similarities and the differences between what happened with USSR going Lenin, Stalin, the Russian, that initial revolution. I talk about all of that, and I document the historic case and why it's so moronic for people to put communism on the opposite side of fascism. It is ahistorical. It is ahistorical. Okay, ahistorical. So when they talk about fascism, and when they talk about that merging in sense of the state with these corporate entities, which by legal definition, corporate entities essentially are, they necessitate the state, and the state needs to be there in order for them to exist. But what you have right here is a prime example of that, right? And this is why I was like the only YouTuber or person that was a commentator that was talking about what they were doing, what they wanted to do with hijacking of factories for the sake of this virus. I was the only one that was saying, well, that's your fascism right there. Chuck Schumer, Bernie Sanders, these guys are sitting here advocating that, well, of course, it's for the common good, but they were literally wanting to utilize the Korean Wartime Act, in which it allows the state to hijack factories to make whatever it is that they want. So that's my thing. And what's hilarious to me is that the side that has been advocating. Now, that doesn't mean that the Republicans are without fault here, but the side that has been yelling and screaming the loudest about the other side is a fascist, they themselves have a lot more in common than what it is that they initially think when it comes to what actual fascism is. It's not what they say fascism is, what fascism actually is, which, again, fascism is not simply put bad right-winger, which is what they utilize it as. Bad right-winger that does things I don't like. No. So, take it for whatever way that you may. I just find it absolutely hilarious that right now, what you just saw with this coordinated effort to get people off of their platform, like that was, I don't care who you are, that had to have been weird, right? Well, what it was is they not only took Trump off, they took all of his a bunch of these colleagues off. I mean, I had lost followers, so it wasn't just his colleagues. It was a lot of people that the excuse was that were inciting violence, which is just nonsense, right? They took them off, and then the one platform, they're in the works right now. Google, I believe, is taking it all the way off. Apple gave them a 24-hour ultimatum for some bull crap, moderation crap. So they all work together. It was a combined, coordinated effort by these gigantic corporate entities. Again, called upon by people connected with the state that are actually employees of the state one way or another. And they're calling other people fascists. God dog it, man. Oh, that in itself is just it's beyond hilarious. But I'm gonna end on this note. The whole inciting of violence and that being an excuse is bullcrap. The only thing that they are mad at is that their cathedral they felt was infiltrated, which I'll talk about in the next segment. Is just the fact that you people use terms like insurrection and coup is just hilarious. But what's even more hilarious that side would dare to act as if they haven't incited violence. 5 months post George Floyd, or however long ago that was, cities were set ablaze. Inner cities were set on fire. Looted out of, 20 or so people were killed out of all of that. Including, I know y'all care so much about y'all cathedrals, including y'all's government, federal and state government buildings being vandalized, if you will. All of that existed, and they said nothing to the people who were encouraging that, excusing that, saying, well, all of these people are mad, it makes you uncomfortable, blah, blah, blah. They were saying all of that, and not once was it claimed that they were inciting violence by these tech entities, these social media entities. Not once did that happen. When we know more people, more damage was done, more people were killed out of that whole scenario because it took place over a longer period of time, not just a couple of hours of dicking around in Nancy Pelosi's office. So more people died, more businesses got destroyed, but it wasn't you set your feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk. You can't have that. You attack that cathedral. Even though it not like they set the Capitol building on fire, they was right back there the same night. That's inciting violence because that was supposedly encouraged. All of these blue check marks, people that work with the state, they got D's next to their name, were encouraging it, excusing their bad behavior. Yeah, it's just insurance. As people literally were killed in those instances and people's businesses were destroyed. That wasn't inciting violence. It was never claimed. In fact, the same big mega corporations backed them. Black Lives Matter, right? Blah, blah, blah. Do not sit up here and tell me this has anything to do with inciting violence, because it doesn't. Obama, and this is why it's so hilarious and why this all is about rhetoric and how things look. Because if they really cared about who incited violence, there'd be absolutely no president that would have a Twitter. Nobody that really worked for the federal government Department of Defense would have a Twitter. Like I posted the other day, Barack Obama, and he essentially took credit for it because he apologized for it. When you consider him bombing more countries than Bush, when you talk about the the bombing of Doctors Without Borders, which I believe 15 people died over that. And he apologized for it. He said he took credit for it. These presidents have been, and this is, now Trump I'm not excusing him because he did much of the same shit. Now, he didn't necessarily start any new wars like the ones before him, but he did much of the same shit. But that wasn't inciting violence. So let me get this straight. You can literally kill motherfuckers, is what I'm saying. Kill groups of people. Thousands, hundreds and thousands of people. That's not inciting violence. You can have a key role in that. Like that's specifically what the president does. That's what they're responsible for when it comes to foreign policy. And in some instances, when it comes to initiating the conflict, the House of Criminals, they sign off on it too, and they fund it. The fact that they act like that is not even a thing shows you that this is never about nonviolence. This is never about inciting violence. They do that. They do that in every NDAA that they pass, for the most part, because that's not what it's about. What it is an ideological, philosophical difference between this side and that side, and they want to eliminate that. And I wish we'd be honest. I don't care where you're at on the political spectrum, libertarian, conservative, leftist. If you can't even admit that, because again, what I'm talking about right now is not my opinion, right? Those are facts, okay? Those are facts that these guys are responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. That is okay. Let them tell it. But the event you kick your feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk, the cathedral got it, and now all of a sudden it's about inciting violence. Nobody's looking at this honestly. And perhaps if there is to be a frustration of mine, that's more so what it is. This ain't got nothing to do with that, inciting violence. They've been doing that forever. They did it they don't do it only abroad. They did it on the previous 5 months domestically in America. In America. And they backed the groups that did it. Right? Or it was any event that they did it, and the ones that would half-ass, well, those aren't really our guys, right? Well, you couldn't stop them, and they're connected to your groups, and they use the protests don't seem to take long before that turned into a situation where you're looting businesses, and there's violence being had, right? But Trump never literally said, raid the fucking Capitol, which is not what happened. Like, can we be honest with it? And we'll talk about that next segment, but I have no desire to defend Trump. I have no desire to even defend his colleagues. I don't give a shit about any of that. All I'm saying is y'all not looking at this honestly. And the minute y'all start to, we can start getting to some actual solutions. But save me this bull crap about you being anti-fascist. Save me this bull crap about you caring about the inciting of violence, because there's a side that has been doing that, and they've been seeing virtually no consequence from these corporate entities.